I want to take a minute to talk about something that's been floating around lately. There have been some accusations going around that I use AI to generate my tattoo flash. And yeah, those accusations are true. I do use AI. I've been experimenting with it since early 2023, and by July of that year, I was fully committed. This isn't a confession, and it's definitely not an apology. It's just a fact. What I want to do here is explain why I made that choice, what it actually means for my work, and where I think tattooing and art in general is headed. This isn't for trolls or comment section warriors. I don't debate those people. I just delete the comments and move on. Life's too short for that. This is a conversation with my peers, with friends, with other tattooers who actually care about the craft, because I think there's a lot of unnecessary stigma around AI, and most of it comes from misunderstandings about what AI actually is and how tattooing has always evolved. So here's what I want to walk through. First, I'm going to talk about where traditional flash really comes from. I'll point to documented examples. Tattoo Time, old flash sheets, real tattoo history that show borrowing, adapting, and straight up uncredited imagery has been standard practice for over 100 years. Second, I'll explain what I'm actually doing with AI and why, in a lot of ways, it's fundamentally different from traditional copying practices and maybe even more ethical. Third, I'll zoom out and put this in historical context. Every major technological shift in tattooing, machines, Photoshop, Procreate, iPads, was met with resistance before it was eventually accepted. This isn't new. Fourth, I'll talk about my own background with technology. I've been working with computational tools since 1983 when I was coding on a Commodore 64 before I was even 6 years old. This isn't a sudden pivot for me, it's a 40-year pattern. Fifth, I'll get into the bigger questions. What is art? What is creativity? And where does the real craft of tattooing actually live? And finally, I'll talk about where we're headed. What I might mean for the future of tattooing and what it means for the next generation of tattooers coming up behind us. I'm not trying to convince anyone. I'm not here to win an argument. I'm just explaining my path for the people who are curious, thoughtful, or maybe a little skeptical, but still willing to listen. Before we get into tattoo history specifically, I want to zoom out for a second and talk about something bigger that's happening all around us. There's a futurist named Ray Kurzweil. He's also Google's director of engineering. He's spent decades studying technological change, and he describes something called the law of accelerating returns. The basic idea is this: technological progress isn't linear, it's exponential. Each breakthrough makes the next one happen faster. What took decades 100 years ago now takes years. What took years a decade ago now takes months. Kurzweil argues that we're approaching what he calls the singularity, a point where artificial intelligence becomes capable of improving itself. And once that happens, change doesn't just continue, it accelerates in ways that are hard to predict. Another thinker worth mentioning is Yuval Noah Harari, the historian and author of Homo Deus. Harari argues that we're watching humanity shift from Homo sapiens to Homo Deus, humans becoming godlike through technology, not in a religious sense, but in our ability to shape matter, life, and even consciousness in ways that would have looked like miracles to people in earlier generations. He writes that in the 21st century, humans are likely to seriously pursue immortality, happiness, and even divinity, that Homo sapiens will begin upgrading itself into gods. Now, you don't have to believe every prediction Kurzweil or Harari makes, but the underlying pattern is hard to deny. Technology accelerates, and when it accelerates, it changes us. I see AI in tattooing as a small expression of that much larger pattern. Just like the electric tattoo machine changed the craft, just like Photoshop did, just like Procreate and iPads did, AI is changing tattooing again, and it's doing it faster than any of those previous shifts. This isn't about replacing human artistry. It's about algorithmic assistance amplifying human capability. And that's already how most of modern life works. We navigate with GPS. We communicate with autocorrect. We make decisions with search engines. So the real question isn't whether we'll use algorithmic assistance. The question is how thoughtfully and how skillfully we choose to use it. So with that bigger picture in mind, I want to have an honest conversation with my peers about something we all know, but almost never talk about out loud. For more than a century, tattoo flash has been built on borrowed imagery, adapted imagery, blatantly stolen imagery, endlessly recycled imagery. That's not an accusation. That's just documented history and normal industry practice. Take the crawling panther, for example, one of the most iconic images in American traditional tattooing. According to Tattoo Time, New Tribalism, that design was first adapted to tattooing by Milwaukee artist Amon Dietzel, who pulled it from a 1934 children's mythology book. He saw an illustration he liked, adapted it for tattooing, and it became traditional flash. And from there, it was copied thousands of times. That same pattern repeats across the entire American traditional canon. So much of what we now treat as sacred, authentic tattoo imagery was originally lifted from commercial illustration, book art, and popular culture. Now, if you really want to understand what's historically been considered acceptable practice in tattooing, look at the industry's most respected publication, Don Ed Hardy's Tattoo Time series. These books weren't fringe zines. They were the gold standard. They were essentially what Instagram is today, except curated by editors, publishers, and historians. Let me give you a few examples from Tattoo Time Volume 1, Art from the Heart. On page 38, there's a Mecha-Godzilla tattoo by Mike Malone, done in Austin in 1986. Beautiful work, featured prominently. No reference given. No mention of Toho Studios. No credit to the original designers. On page 49, there's Mike Malone's full Godzilla back piece. Again, no mention of Godzilla's creators. Copyrighted intellectual property, reproduced on skin, and proudly published in the most respected tattoo book of its time. On page 93, Leo Zulueta tattoos a social distortion skeleton. No band credit, no mention of Mackie Osborne, just the tattoo presented as tattoo work. And these weren't random artists, these were pioneers, legends, and the industry's most respected publication documented their work without demanding source attribution, because that has never been the standard in tattooing. Pick up almost any tattoo magazine, Skin and Ink, Inked. Look for reference citations. They're not there. Original illustrators, photographers, bands, comic artists, almost never credited. Only the tattooer's name. So when people ask why I don't cite AI sources with my posts, I'm not breaking some sacred rule. I'm following the same standard this industry has always operated under. Here's another piece of the puzzle that's worth understanding when we talk about American traditional tattooing. A huge amount of what we now call traditional style comes from one person, Cap Coleman. Cap Coleman lived from 1884 to 1973, and he's often referred to as the godfather of American tattooing. His signature approach, bold line work, strong shading, clean, patriotic imagery, basically became the blueprint for traditional tattooing as we know it. In fact, Coleman shading is still an industry standard technique. We all use it, whether we realize it or not. So the real question is, where did Cap Coleman get his aesthetic? It didn't come out of thin air. It came from carnival sign painting and patriotic commercial imagery. He understood what worked on skin, bold, simple, readable designs that held up over time. I've also heard, and it tracks historically, that wallpaper designs played a big role in early Flash. Printing limitations forced artists to simplify forms, flatten colors, and focus on clarity, and that ended up being perfect for tattooing. And this is the pattern. Someone innovates, others adapt it. Over time, it becomes tradition. That's how tattooing has always evolved. And honestly, that's how every craft evolves. What the pioneers actually did, I want to be clear. I have immense respect for the pioneers. Mike Malone, Leo Zulueta, Don Ed Hardy, Cap Coleman, these men built our craft. They pushed tattooing forward as an art form. They deserve every accolade they've received. I'm not criticizing them for adapting imagery or not citing every reference. That wasn't the practice then, and it's not the practice now. But I do want to point out, I'm doing something different with AI. When I generate Flash using AI, I'm not tracing Godzilla or copying Social D's Skelly. I'm generating computationally original imagery that didn't exist before. Compare that to the common practice of tattooing copyrighted characters, band logos, and other artists' work directly. Yet somehow, traditional copying of existing work is accepted as standard practice, while AI-generated original work is criticized as not being legitimate art because the tattooer didn't personally draw every element. That's the disconnect I'm trying to understand. Let me be really honest about my own practice and about what happens in tattoo shops everywhere. I have consistently tattooed artwork that I did not create and that I did not have permission to reproduce. That's not a scandal, that's just tattooing. I've tattooed album artwork. Skeleton Witches Beyond the Permafrost. The client wanted it, I executed it, we both posted it. Completely standard practice. Basquiat's Crowned Dinosaur. Warhol's Soup Can. Iron Maiden's Eddie. I didn't draw any of those. I tattooed all of them, and no one had a problem with it. I've reproduced celebrity tattoos too. Lemmy's Born to Lose, Live to Win, in the same spot, on a fan. Nobody questioned it. Tupac's Outlaw Tattoo and Tribal Armbands, in the exact same placement. Nobody questioned it. Goldberg's Tribal, same spot. No one questioned it. Walk into almost any shop and look at the portfolios. You'll see band logos, comic characters, anime, horror art, fantasy illustrations. We post this stuff proudly. We charge for it. We build reputations on how faithfully we can reproduce copyrighted material. There are artists right now riding the anime wave who have built their entire careers on established characters they didn't create. Portrait artists use photographs taken by other photographers of celebrities they've never met, and they don't get permission from or credit either party. And just to be clear, I'm saying all of this specifically in defense of using AI for traditional flash. The use of AI in realism and portrait tattooing is already exponentially higher. And honestly, that side of tattooing seems to be accepting AI much faster than the tratty daddies and mommies. According to intellectual property attorney Mark Misthal, every unauthorized tattoo of a copyrighted image is technically copyright infringement. But the industry operates on a kind of mutual non-aggression pact, where rights holders generally don't sue individual tattoo artists. I'm not saying this is wrong. I'm saying it's reality. It's what we do. But here's the part I'm trying to understand. When AI generates entirely original imagery, trained on existing art in the same way we train our own eyes by studying masters, that's when people suddenly get concerned about legitimacy. And I'm genuinely asking why. Why is one considered normal, accepted practice, and the other controversial? Speaking of references, there's another group that's worth mentioning here. Japanese-style tattooers. They are absolute masters of the reference. Traditional Japanese tattoo artists spend years digging through obscure sources. Woodblock prints, ukiyo-e, mythology books, old scrolls. They research deeply, and they don't share those references openly. They guard them. They treat them as a competitive advantage. When they present finished work, they don't walk everyone through their entire research process. They don't disclose every source, image, or book that informed the piece. And that's not a criticism. That's smart practice. That's craft tradition, and it's respected. I bring this up because reference use and selective disclosure about process has always been part of professional tattooing. Using references isn't new. Not talking about every reference isn't new either. It's how tattooers have always worked. There's another voice from tattoo history that I think is really important here. Cliff Raven. In Tattoo Time, New Tribalism, he wrote an essay called Thoughts on Pre-Technological Tattooing. And his core insight is this: technology doesn't just change the images we create, it changes how we think about images in the first place. Raven drew a distinction between two eras: pre-technological tattooing, where black designs functioned mainly as embellishment of the human form, and modern tattooing, where skin became a canvas to display art. That shift, from hand poke to machine, didn't just expand what tattooers could physically do. It fundamentally changed how we conceptualize the work. Now here's where I think the parallel matters. AI is a machine. Just like the electric oscillating relay tattoo machine was a machine. And I believe AI is creating another shift. The application to skin is the same. The rules are the same. Bold lines, readable composition, solid saturation. but the imagery itself is being pushed in ways I honestly haven't seen in my 23 years of tattooing. New design elements, new compositional structures, new color relationships, new stylistic fusions, stuff that actually feels new. And that's what technology has always done in tattooing. So let's talk about where this could actually go. Imagine being able to design full bodysuits that are truly tailored to an individual body. That's already possible now, but it's slow and it's incredibly labor intensive. Now, imagine being able to present 10 refined concepts to a client overnight instead of one concept after 2 weeks of nonstop work. Think about what that does to the client experience. More refinement, more client input, better collaboration. And all of that without turning the artist's life into a grind. That's the part people miss. As Ray Kurzweil's law of accelerating returns suggests, what feels barely possible today becomes routine tomorrow. AI-driven bodysuit design based on three-dimensional body scans, real-time collaboration with clients, instant visualization of how designs will age on the body over time. None of that is science fiction. It's coming. Here's what I've come to understand about my own practice. The more time I spend actually tattooing, rather than preparing to tattoo, the happier I am. When I'm tattooing, that's where my head goes quiet. That's where I'm centered. That's my place of zen. AI doesn't replace my craft, it returns me to it. Design generation happens almost instantly. Curation takes minutes. And then I get to spend my day doing what I actually love, putting tattoos into skin. That's where the art lives. That's where the skill matters. That's where the human connection happens. At the end of the day, the client doesn't care how many hours were spent sketching beforehand. They care that the tattoo on their body is beautiful, that it's well executed, and that it's going to last a lifetime. The physical application is 100% human skill, developed over 23 years and more than 10,000 hours of practice. And that thing we all call tattoo magic, it's still there. People still walk out of the shop feeling like they were in a special place for a sacred reason, because they were. There's another historical piece that really matters here, and it has to do with delegation. The idea that real art requires the master to personally execute every single element of a work is actually pretty modern. For most of art history, that wasn't how great work was made. Take Michelangelo. When he worked on the Sistine Chapel, he didn't do everything himself. He ran a large workshop. Assistants prepared surfaces, mixed pigments, transferred cartoons, and filled in architectural elements. Michelangelo focused on the central figures and the moments that mattered most. Rembrandt did the same thing. He ran a workshop that produced hundreds of paintings. Art historians estimate that only about 300 to 350 of the roughly 600 paintings attributed to Rembrandt were primarily painted by his own hand. The rest were produced under his supervision. Rubens went even further. His studio was basically a painting factory with specialists assigned to drapery, landscapes, animals, each person doing what they were best at. In all of these cases, the art didn't live in every individual brushstroke. It lived in the vision, the composition, the decision-making, the quality control, the curation. That's the tradition I see myself working in. When I use AI for design generation, the AI assists. I curate, I refine, I decide what's worth using. And in the end, I'm still the one applying it to skin. That part hasn't changed. Here's something that might surprise people. AI-generated flash may actually be more ethical than a lot of traditional tattoo practices. When I generate flash using AI, a few important things are happening. First, no specific artist is being copied. The AI isn't pulling from one image or one person. It synthesizes patterns and generates something new. The output doesn't match any single input. Second, no copyrights are directly violated. I'm not tracing someone's Godzilla. I'm not reproducing a band logo. Every design is computationally unique, and copyrighted material is explicitly blocked from being generated. Third, no single source is being exploited. The work is genuinely original, synthesized from learned patterns rather than lifted from one identifiable place. Now compare that to common tattoo practice. Copyrighted characters reproduced directly, band logos tattooed without permission, flash designs recycled endlessly, entire styles absorbed and labeled tradition. Copy and paste from multiple sources to create something new. That's just reality. The AI is learning from existing work the same way I learned, by studying Ed Hardy, Mike Malone, and countless others. Learning from existing work is how all art evolves. As Cornell law professor James Grimmelman points out, copyright law makes an important distinction. Copying expression is prohibited. Learning from ideas is permitted. An AI trained on copyrighted works is learning patterns, much closer to how humans absorb art history than to direct copying. And it's worth noting this too. Teams of lawyers paid millions of dollars by the largest tech companies in the world have built these systems specifically to avoid copyright infringement. Stealing isn't something you opt out of. It's safeguarded against by default. There's a pattern here, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. Tools exist to extend human capability beyond our biological limits. That's their purpose. The tattoo machine itself was revolutionary, and by the standards we now use to judge machines and art, it was deeply controversial. When Samuel O'Reilly patented the electric tattoo machine in 1891, it's easy to imagine what traditionalists were saying at the time, that it removed the spiritual connection, that it cheapened the craft, that it wasn't real tattooing anymore. They were wrong. The machine amplified precision, speed, and access, but it did introduce a machine into the process, and that was the first step. AI is simply the latest step. The same thing happened with photography. When photography appeared in 1839, the French painter Paul Delaroche famously declared, "From today, painting is dead." He was wrong too. Photography didn't kill painting. It freed painters from pure realism and helped spark modern art. Then came Photoshop in the 1990s. Real photographers demanded darkroom purity. Digital tools were considered cheating. Now digital post-processing is standard, and then there's iPads in tattooing. When I started using one in March of 2015, before the Apple Pencil even existed, I got mocked. Not real art. Learn to paint. Not traditional. Fast forward to today, every young artist uses an iPad. Most old artists do too. The pattern is always the same. First, mockery and dismissal, then moral panic, then gradual adoption, then industry standard, and finally, historical amnesia. We forget it was ever controversial at all. Right now, with AI, we're somewhere between stages 2 and 3, and this lines up perfectly with what Ray Kurzweil describes. Each technology builds on the previous one, and adoption accelerates. The tattoo machine took decades to become standard. iPads took years. AI will likely take months to years. The pace keeps speeding up, and it always has. This isn't a sudden jump to AI for me. It's a pattern that goes all the way back to early childhood. In 1983, before I was 6 years old, I was coding on a Commodore 64. I used it to generate an American flag. That was my first experience with computational image creation. I remember being completely fascinated by the idea that you could tell a machine what to make, and it would render it. By 1985, I was using computers with dot matrix printers to make artwork. You know, the long paper with the holes on the sides. Even then, I was experimenting with how machines could assist visual creation. In 1992, I created a cartoon using a VTech video painter, and it actually aired on our school's morning show. In 1993, I used Video Toaster to create looping visuals for my band's talent show performance. I mixed horror film clips with early 3D rendering and video effects and played them on monitors during the set. Fast forward to 2003 through 2022. 20 years of traditional tattooing, learning the craft, developing skill, building expertise the hard way. In 2003, I launched my own tattoo website, coded myself using Dreamweaver. On March 11th, 2015, I started using an iPad for tattoo design. This was before the iPad Pro, before the Apple Pencil. That early work is still on my Instagram. On August 7th, 2022, I taught myself Blender, three-dimensional rendering software, to create custom tattoo reference. Different algorithms. Same idea, computational image generation. On January 20th, 2023, I signed up for Midjourney. On February 11th, 2023, I did my first AI-generated tattoo. It was experimental. AI was barely usable at the time, and I corrected almost everything manually. By July 11th, 2023, I committed to posting 100% AI-generated designs on Instagram. At that point, I had mastered prompt engineering and developed a unique aesthetic that felt like mine. On April 18th, 2024, I released an AI flashbook, 250 pages, over 1,000 images. It sold hundreds of copies internationally. Each tool followed the same pattern: adopted early, learned deeply, mastered, then proven through results. This isn't a trend for me. It's a 4-decade progression toward computational assistance in image creation. AI isn't a departure. It's the logical next step. And I want to be clear about something else. I never hid it. I never denied using AI. I talked about it openly with clients. I did a full leg sleeve of early, rough AI slop with a friend, embraced the experimental look. The photos are still on Instagram. People who worked with me knew. The flashbook was actually their idea. I just didn't announce it on every single post. And the reason is simple. It's the same reason traditional artists never shared all their references. Competitive advantage. People guarded Dover books, old magazines, rare scrolls, obscure imagery, trade secrets. I found a powerful tool. I learned it early. I built a massive, unique library with it, while a lot of people were still debating whether AI was legitimate. Just look at the art. Before reality TV tattoo shows, not every tattoo needed a backstory. And even then, the story was never about the tattooer. Maybe Snake Navarro wants to hover over your shoulder and watch every step of your process, but I don't. Who honestly gives a shit how I make Flash, watercolor, colored pencils, Procreate, AI, whatever? Does it look cool? Is the tattoo solid? Did you have fun getting it? Does it make you smile when you look at it? That's what matters to me. If you're looking for long artist statements and detailed process explanations, that's more the MoMA world. I hate that approach, and it's not how tattooing has traditionally worked. If you want that kind of experience, go to a museum of modern art. 2 years in, this is already starting to look exactly like the iPad moment. Everyone's catching on. Everyone's starting to use AI, so now I'm being open about it. Because after 2 years of daily generation, and after releasing the book, I've built one of the most comprehensive collections of AI-generated Flash that exists. I secured my place as an early adopter. As an innovator, I genuinely believe I've created the first published collection of AI Flash, and I'm proud of that. It marks an era. No shame, just innovation. I want to take a minute to talk about who I am beyond just tattooing. I've been tattooing since 2003. That's 23 years. Well over 30,000 hours of experience. That's mastery. 3 times over. My apprentices are stone-cold killers. Not only do I understand my craft, I understand how to teach it, how to communicate its nuances. My work before AI is just as solid as my work after AI. If you scroll back through my Instagram, you'd honestly have a hard time pinpointing the switch if I hadn't told you. Small scale, large scale, it's all there. Before AI, before the iPad, before Instagram, before Facebook. But I'm not just a tattoo artist. I've worked across a lot of different mediums: stone carving, oil painting, watercolor, acrylic, vinyl toys, 3-dimensional modeling, music, polymer clay, mixed media, NFT art, and tattooing. If I can create with something, I will. That said, my interest in philosophy and theology actually goes deeper than my interest in tattooing itself. I'm obsessed with the big questions. What is art? What is consciousness? What is creativity? I'm heavily influenced by thinkers like Plotinus and Ananda Coomaraswamy, and by emanation theory. I believe creativity doesn't originate in the material world at all. Artists aren't the source. We're vessels. Before artists signed their work, art belonged to the all, not to the individual. I genuinely believe that. And as technology continues to relieve humans from certain kinds of burden and a new paradigm forms, We're going to have to wrestle with these ideas more seriously as a species if we want to navigate what's coming next. Tattooing is one way I explore these questions. AI is another. They're not opposites. They're complementary tools for the same inquiry. Tattooing is sacred to me. It's a huge part of my life, but it's not my entire life. I'm approaching all of this from a much broader perspective. And technology, like it or not, is part of that view. Here's something else that's worth acknowledging. Most professional tattoo artists are service providers more than they are pure autonomous artists. That's not an insult. That's just reality. Think about a normal day in a tattoo shop. A client wants a portrait of their grandmother. You execute their vision. A client wants a band logo. You reproduce it. A client wants an anime character. You adapt something they already found. A client wants their kids' names. You provide clean, technical execution. That's the job, and it's not unique to tattooing. Architects design to client specifications. Illustrators work on assignment. Graphic designers respond to briefs. The craft lives in skilled execution, not in unlimited personal expression. So when people say AI-assisted art lacks soul because it isn't purely the artist's personal vision, most commercial art isn't purely personal vision either. The soul is in the skill, the taste, the curation, the refinement, and the execution. All of that is still human, and all of that is still present in my AI-assisted workflow. I think if we're being honest, the real concern here isn't ethics, and it's not artistry either, it's change. AI generates high-quality imagery, it does it fast, and it's getting better constantly. That's unsettling, especially for people who spent decades developing traditional skills. I get that, I really do. But here's the important part. The machine doesn't replace the craft. The physical side of tattooing, stretch, needle depth, hand speed, understanding how skin heals over time, that's still 100% human skill. That's decades of experience, that's muscle memory, that's earned. I didn't make me a better tattooer. 23 years of practice did. What AI did was make me a more efficient designer. And those are two very different things. So let's talk about where this is headed. William Gibson once said, "The future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. AI image generation is already here. Artists using it right now are producing excellent work, often with real advantages. Faster iteration, more variations, more efficient refinement. And if Ray Kurzweil's idea of the singularity holds true, we're moving toward a point where AI capabilities improve so quickly that it becomes hard to predict what's possible next." In tattooing, that might look like this. Real-time design generation during consultations. AI systems that understand skin aging and can show how a tattoo might look in 20 years. Personalized style fusion based on a client's tastes. Collaborative AI that learns your aesthetic and assists like a studio partner. These aren't sci-fi fantasies. Given the exponential pace of AI development, they're probably 5 to 10 years away. So the real question isn't whether these tools will exist. The question is whether we'll be ready to use them thoughtfully and skillfully when they arrive. I want to be clear about something. I genuinely respect people who don't want to use AI or any other new technology. Every craft has practitioners at every level using every possible approach. That diversity is healthy. It's part of what keeps a craft alive. Some people love technology. I'm one of them. Some people prefer traditional methods. That's just as valid. I'm not on social media criticizing anyone for using pencils and tracing paper. That's their path. This is mine. Over the last 23 years, I've worked through a lot of different methods. I drew skulls from scratch, starting with a circle and construction lines. I used skull references. I drew doves by hand. I used the same dove reference everyone else used. You know the one. First result on Google Images, guilty as charged. Then I moved to the iPad, then to digital workflows, then to three-dimensional rendering, and now I use AI. Each method served a purpose. Each one helped me do better work for my clients. And now I'm creating unique AI-generated images that no one else has. Not copied, not slightly remixed, genuinely unique, built to follow tattooing's technical rules. The work is solid, it's bright, it's bold, it's beautiful. Clients love it. and it's going to last. So here's the thing I genuinely don't understand. Why is copying a Sailor Jerry design exactly, sometimes even bragging about how faithful it is to the original, considered more legitimate than creating a unique AI-generated image that doesn't copy another artist, follows tattooing's rules, bold lines, solid color, readable composition, is genuinely unique, will last a lifetime, and makes the client happy? If the answer is because Sailor Jerry was a real artist and AI isn't, then we're not really talking about craft, and we're not really talking about ethics. We're talking about tradition for tradition's sake. And I get the love of tradition. I really do. But tattooing has never been static. We moved from hand poke to machine, from flash sheets to custom work, from pencil to iPad, and now we're moving into AI-assisted design. That's not a rupture. That's the same evolution this craft has always followed. There's another part of this conversation that the industry doesn't really like to talk about: the flashbook business. Traditional flashbook publishers often profit from the work of artists who are long dead, frequently without fair or meaningful compensation to their estates. That's just how it works. Here's the contrast. My AI flashbook is 250 pages with over 1,000 images. I created all of it. I own all of it, and I profit from my own work. Traditional flash publishers, on the other hand, often locate or purchase old flash from deceased pioneers, then repackage and resell it, sometimes for thousands of dollars. And in many cases, the original artists' families receive little or nothing. I'm not saying this is inherently wrong. I'm not trying to cancel anyone. I'm just describing reality. And it's worth keeping in mind when people start talking about ethics, attribution, and legitimacy. My AI work doesn't exploit a dead artist's legacy. No family is being cut out of royalties. No one's work is being endlessly resold without their consent. It's my work, and I'm responsible for it. I want to talk about my relationship with criticism, because I think it's important to be clear here. I'm not trying to convince everyone. We live in a pretty polarized moment. Some people are always going to oppose AI art, no matter what arguments you make or evidence you show, and that's their right. AI itself is polarizing. I don't spend my energy arguing with people who've already made up their minds. I just delete the comments and move on. Life's too short. Most of the criticism tends to come from very new artists, or from people who aren't artists at all. People without decades of work behind them. That's fine. Everyone's entitled to an opinion. But I've already done the work of reconciling this choice with my own values and my own worldview. I'm at peace with it, and I'm going to keep going. History shows us this pattern over and over again. Early adopters of powerful tools are usually mocked at first, then resisted, then quietly copied, and eventually they're seen as innovators and pioneers. The people making fun of AI artists today will probably either be using it themselves in 5 years, or they'll have moved on to something else entirely. I don't need universal approval. I'm doing this because it works, because clients love it, because other artists buy my flash, and because I genuinely believe in it. That's enough for me. I want to be clear about my tone and my intent here. I'm not writing this as a justification. I'm writing it as an explanation. This is me talking to peers and friends, trying to break down a stigma. It's not me arguing with trolls or critics. Those people don't matter to me. I delete the comments and move on. What I do want is an honest conversation about a few things that actually matter. Where Flash has always come from, how technology has always changed our craft, why I've chosen this path, and what it really means for the work we do every day. I fully respect that some people will disagree. That's fine. There's room for a lot of different approaches in tattooing. There always has been, and that's part of what makes this craft worth caring about. So, what about the work itself? At the end of the day, the tattoo I put on your skin is handmade, permanent, and entirely my craftsmanship. How I arrive at the design, whether it's sketched by hand, drawn on an iPad, 3D rendered, or AI generated, that's just the preparation phase. The art is in the execution. If using AI allows me to offer more design options, deliver faster turnaround, explore combinations I might not have reached otherwise, provide better service to my clients, and spend more time actually tattooing my place of Zen, then I'm going to use it. I'm not gatekeeping anything. I'm trying to serve people well. Traditional Flash was built on adapted imagery. We still reproduce copyrighted material all the time. This industry has never operated on pure originality or strict attribution. AI-generated Flash creates genuinely original work, synthesized from learned patterns, much closer to how artists learn by studying other artists than by directly copying. The future includes AI. The real question is whether we'll use it skillfully and responsibly. I've been experimenting with it since February of 2023. I committed fully in July of 2023. My Flash book came out in April of 2024 and sold hundreds of copies to professional tattooers around the world. The market is already deciding, and the resistance is fading. I choose to move forward thoughtfully, skillfully, and without fear. That's where I stand. I want to end with one last note about how this was written. If you've made it this far, you've spent about 35 minutes reading an essay that cites specific sources, builds careful arguments, and shows a real understanding of both tattoo tradition and technological change. You've read about Amon Dietzel and the 1934 mythology book, Mike Malone's work in Tattoo Time, Cap Coleman's influence, Cliff Raven's philosophy, Kurzweil's law of accelerating returns, Harari's idea of homo deus, and the repeating historical pattern of tool adoption. All of that was written by a tattoo artist with 23 years of professional experience working across multiple mediums, someone who started experimenting with computational art on a Commodore 64 in 1983, and who's been consciously exploring the role of technology in creation for more than 40 years. But here's something worth knowing. This essay was written with an AI, not by an AI, but with one. I supplied the ideas, the experiences, the philosophical framework, the arguments, the stories, and the verified sources from my own library. The AI helped me structure it, refine the language, and organize more than 14,000 words into something coherent. In the same way, I use AI to generate thousands of Flash designs, then curate them, refine them, and tattoo the best ones. I used AI here to help articulate thoughts I've been developing for years. Here's the part people often miss. The AI didn't magically know tattoo history. It didn't know our craft's nuances, its hidden traditions, or its contradictions. Like any tool, I had to teach it where to look. I had to give it the sources, the context, the understanding. The vision was mine. The knowledge was mine. I just made it more efficient to express. And that brings us right back to the core point. Tools don't replace artists, they amplify them. The tool doesn't diminish the work, it enables it. And if you think using AI makes this less legitimate or less valuable, well, you just spent 35 minutes reading it. The work speaks for itself. I really do talk like this in real life. I really do have knowledge about the things I've written here. And I really did what I've said I've done. This isn't a manifesto. It's just me explaining my path to peers who might be curious or skeptical. There's room in this craft for many approaches. This one is mine.